Hello and welcome to Young and Sober, the podcast where we discuss what it means to get sober under the age of 30 and stay sober. If you're sober, sober curious, or just curious, you've come to the right place. Any discussions heard here are personal to the individual and should not be taken as the stance of AA or other fellowships as a whole.
Welcome to episode 8. This week we'll be chatting to Ollie, who's come to talk to us about being young, sober and student life. Ollie, how you doing?
I'm very well, very well. How are you?
Yeah, good, thanks. I've got a bit of a cold, so I feel like I'm sounding a bit husky. Otherwise, I'm okay. Christian, how you doing?
I'm feeling good. I've done a workout this morning, so I'm feeling pumped, ready for action today. Yeah.
Nice. So Ollie, before we get to your story, we just want to start with a question from our listeners.
Sure.
Ali asks, what's with all the sayings? Do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. I think it's an interest. I think with the sayings, it's good to condense like really important lessons into like short, snappy things. You know, like the just for today thing. You know, those things like I guess they've persisted for a long time. I think one thing with the sayings is I've heard people try and get their own sayings going, you know, like something that you can like really tell that someone's like thought about and they're like, yeah, this is snappy, I'm gonna make this work, and it doesn't resonate, and so it just dies out. You know, the sayings that we have like around and about, I think
live and let live and stuff like that.
Yeah,
live and let live and
keep it simple,
think
let go, let God.
That's a good one.
Yeah, I like that one.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that I at the beginning looked at them and was like, oh my god, this is ridiculous, and then the longer I spent in, the more I found them really helpful, and I actually have a bunch of them written and stuck up on my mirror, so that I see them in the morning, and it's just that reminder, like attitude of gratitude, just for today, all of that kind of stuff. And it, like you said, it condenses a really important part of our recovery just into something that's like a quick reminder.
I remember at my home group there was one which had a little rocket ship on it, and it said rocketed into a fourth dimension of existence, and I was just like, what are you talking about? What do you mean? And you know, as you said, Alex, like some of those sayings, like at the time you're like, either these are just really trite or corny, or I don't understand them, and then as time goes on you're like, oh
yeah. I mean, also like a life beyond our wildest dreams, I thought that was so cheesy at the beginning, and now I'm like, this actually is, like, even though it's not what I thought it was going to be, it's definitely way beyond what I expected was possible, you know?
Yeah.
So Ollie, before we continue with student life, do you want to just give us a bit of background? So what is it that brought you to sobriety, and how long have you been sober?
Sure. I think what really brought me to sobriety, I mean, I was drinking a lot, no surprise there, but I think mostly, so to give you like a bit of background, like maybe the, you know, quick run through the time before I actually came in, I was, you know, kind of bouncing around, not really achieving anything with my life, and also happened to have this habit of, you know, drinking a hell of a lot with or like, you know, surrounding myself with people who drank as a kind of like foremost activity, you know. But ultimately, I mean, it was mostly just like, what was really driving me wasn't like, I was never one of those, I don't know a lot of people who are like this, but I was never somebody who would get drunk and then in the morning there'd be all these horrible like things that I'd done Like, I mean, I did a lot of like stupid stuff, embarrassing stuff, but there was never like I wasn't, like taking a couple of beers and then tearing my life apart. It was more just like my head when I wasn't drunk. It was just like an absolute minefield. Like I had so much anxiety, and my comfort zone was getting like smaller and smaller and smaller, and I didn't really know what was going on, or like how to push the boat out. It was kind of like, I guess, in a bit of a downward spiral. And so yeah, it's not a surprise that I drank so much. But then I got sober on the 19th of February 2017, which makes me just over 4 years sober, which is just absolutely mental.
Well done, mate.
Given that, 4 nights on the trot was very, very difficult for me. So yeah.
Ollie, how old are you again?
I am 26, so I was 22 when I put down the drink.
Wow, that's amazing. I know a lot of people who almost wish that they'd come in at 22. I mean, I know that I was ready to come in at 22, but it took me another 5 years to actually pluck up the courage to give it a shot.
Yeah, I can assure you that it's not due to me just having that like a good head on me. It's just a random kind of process as far as I see it. It's very much like not of my own design. I think it was just a bit lucky.
What was your sort of rock bottom moment? What was that moment where you're like, I can't do this anymore?
I think probably the worst one that I had was one time my dad just called me on the phone, and he was talking about this. It's about 3 p.m. on a Tuesday. He was talking about this drunk that he'd just seen walk past a bunch of construction workers. The guy's about like 60, he's disheveled, he's got like a brown suit on, and he's got a can of Stella in his hand, tie undone, all of that. And these construction workers are just like, all right, Darren, been in court again. And he told me that story, and he was just like, that'll be you, that will, Ollie. And I heard that story, that I was just completely unmoved. And I just proceeded to drink as I'm like normally would have done on any other day. Well, not like any other day, but I think that was when I realized it's just like, regardless of how much people try and appeal to me sentimentally, this is just not something that I have any control over. It's just like pretty much everyone in my life had like lost faith in my ability to like kind of achieve anything, and I wasn't a trustworthy person, and yet that just didn't matter to me in the slightest. That was kind of scary to like wake up the morning after that and be like, wow, even that didn't move me an inch.
Yeah. Wow.
Where did it come from then? Did you go into the rooms off your, like, when did you sort of, because I know that obviously, just to give you a bit of background, Ollie was at university when you got sober, right? And you dropped out of university, and then you since getting sober, you've gone back.
Right. Yeah.
So was it, when you ended up getting sober, did that come from you? Was that like, I need to do this, or did it come from somebody else?
It was interesting. I think a friend of mine from way back, his grandfather had gotten sober, 30 years like beforehand or something. And he gave me a call, and he gave me this like inspirational chat, and he was like, get yourself to a detox, get yourself to a meeting. And that was planting the seed. But about a week later, I ended up in rehab. And I think I went there partially because I thought it'd be a break, partially because I thought it was cool, very rock and roll to go to rehab. And and maybe a little bit because I knew I was kind of done. But I think just there, not even so much the people in the rehab, but just also getting to meet like people just around and about in the real world who've been doing this stuff for a while and seemed somewhat contented. I think that's what really kind of like pushed me into sobriety.
And then, so being in rehab, did that kind of speak to you? Was that something that you felt like you took to straight away, or did it take a little while for it to kind of sink in?
It took a minute. It really did take a minute. What else? I mean, so obviously, like, rehab isn't something that I'd recommend or dissuade someone from doing. It's just a way of getting into this stuff. But it is very 24/7 in terms of, like, it's almost like you're doing 9 to 5 recovery. And I think it still took me a couple of weeks to be like, actually, yeah, you know what? They've kind of got me on all fronts here. Like, I think these people have a point. Like the counselors, the people in the meetings, all of that.
Yeah.
But I was kind of stubborn, and I kind of thought a lot of myself. I thought I was just this deadbeat genius, and I could crack things by my own self. And, it took me a minute to let go of that.
Yeah. So in terms of studying, what were you studying before, and how did it kind of transpire that you ended up leaving uni?
So actually, I got like a little academic scholarship to go out to America. So it was very much like a liberal arts uni system. I was in Chicago, and the brilliant thing about that is that it's all split into like individual trimesters, and so you can like ruin everything over an 11-week period and then just pick up and start again 2 weeks later. And so I was always, in the US they have like majors. I was always switching majors. One time it was economics, and then it was public policy, and it was history or whatever. I was just like trying to find something that was the thing that I could do. I think I thought I was finding myself, but in reality, I was just finding that kind of with my present attitudes, I couldn't really get anywhere. But yeah, it was that cycle of, messing things up and then picking myself up and being like, I'm going to get it right this time. And it took me over 2 years to finally realize that I just wasn't able to hack it at university. And it was a really good experience. And I mean, I made, a couple of friends that I'm still very close to now. But it just, I guess it just wasn't right. And so I dropped out after, I think a dean snitched on me to my parents, who were like putting up the rest of the funding. And yeah, all of a sudden it's like, no, you're not out there anymore. You're coming back home. And all of a sudden I was back in this, little town in Gloucestershire, having lived so far away for a while. And it really felt like, yeah, it felt like the conclusion. It was so weird to think that I was just over 22 years old and I thought I'd like had my shot at life and I was done. It's just like,
yeah. I mean, I remember when I went to uni, so I went at 18. I turned 19 in my first year of uni, and I remember getting to uni and feeling like I'd finally found people that drank like me. But I remember my first, so like everyone gets freshers flu, like everyone gets ill after the first week. I ended up getting pneumonia because I'd pushed myself that little bit harder than everyone else, and I missed my first 2 weeks of lectures because I was so ill. I'd cracked a rib from coughing so much, like, and that didn't make any difference. Like, I just kind of thought like, oh, my immune system's just worse than everyone else's. I didn't think anything about the fact that I'd probably gone 10 times harder than everyone else. And I mean, I also remember when I chose what I was going to study, I chose the thing that was going to have the least amount of contact hours, because I knew that I wanted to like be able to go hard, not have to go in that much. Like, it was a lot of independent study. And it was also like, I felt like I kind of went because that's what I was supposed to do, not really because I really, really cared about what I was studying. And I mean, I did end up enjoying, I did psychology and philosophy, and like I did end up enjoying it. But what actually happened for me is I went back to uni in sobriety and did a teaching degree. And I found that because I kind of was so much more in touch with who I was really studying something that I really, really cared about for the first time. And the experience was so different. What was the drinking life for you the first time round when you were at uni?
I think, yeah, very much kind of being drawn to people who, like you said, drunk like I did, and getting into them scrapes as well. Like I also got pneumonia from drinking too much one time. I lost a third of my lung, and I'd go back to the flat and I'd be like, "What am I like?" You know, it was all fun and jokes. It was like, I'm just
Wait,
that.
what? You lost a third? You lost a third of your lung?
Yeah. So it turns out if you drink a lot, sometimes your body secretes the wrong things in the wrong places. This was the doctor's theory at the time. Anyway, I don't know. I'm not a medical person myself. But I ended up getting something called Staphylococcus aureus in my lung. It's really stubborn, was like coughing up blood, and I didn't want to go to hospital.
Did you
Eventually,
smoke?
yeah,
Right.
yeah, and yeah, um, literally as a direct consequence of drinking. And yeah, I think I eventually got to hospital, and I remember seeing the CAT scan, and there's just this great big black hole in one of my lungs. And yeah, spent a week being treated for it. Every time someone came to visit me, they'd have to wear great big gowns and like masks because they couldn't rule out that I didn't have TB. And yeah, literally got out of hospital and was just like, what's up, guys? That was funny, wasn't it? Which is crazy to look
Actually,
back on.
like the drinking age in the States is 21. So did that make a difference at all to people's drinking or not really?
No, for about 2 or 3 months before everyone gets fake IDs, because it's I don't know if you've seen Superbad or anything. It's kind of a slightly more sophisticated version than that. And yeah, it's I think it's interesting. Like the backdrop in the States is like it's a little bit different. You've got like the fraternities and all of that, but honestly, it's difficult to notice. It's like you're going to a fraternity house instead of a club, but the shenanigans are kind of the same, if that makes any sense. Like it's a very similar experience. But I was scared. I was scared because I didn't really know that before I went out there. I was like, oh my God, what if this means I'm going to have a very dry uni experience until I actually hit 21? But I'm sure younger me was grateful for, for that not being the case.
Yeah, yeah. And did you find that you kind of gravitated towards people who drank and used like you did? I know that I definitely, my group of friends to start with were the whole way through were definitely the ones that like went hard. And when I finished uni and got sober, finished uni, I got sober like 5 years later, but I kind of realized that the majority of them I didn't really have that much in common with. Like the only thing we really had in common was the fact that we partied and drank the way we did,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's crazy to think that people I still speak to now are actually not the people that I was like drinking heavily with. That I really consider one of my like best friends. And don't get me wrong, those are people who would be there for me, but I primarily had them in my life, and they had me in their lives because of how we like to go about our weekends and weeknights. Yeah.
Yeah. Christian, what was your uni experience like?
Yeah. Well, I was a bit like you, Alex, in terms of like sort of so I went to Leeds now. What's it called now? Well, it's called Leeds Met when I went. I think it's called Leeds Beckett now. And I basically went to university because that was what I just thought that was like what was expected. That's what you do, and that's what all your mates are doing. And but the thing for me was that I was not ever like academic. I was never like specifically into. I wasn't academic. I was always one of these people that was like a bit of this, a bit of that. Like my A levels was like I did drama, which I did really well in. PE, politics, terrible. I did politics because my dad likes politics. I couldn't have given. I don't even like politics. I got an E in politics, and French because I was all right at French at school. So a real mix. And actually, to be honest, I wanted to do music technology. because the college I went to did it. I think there was possibly, by the way, I know my mum and dad listened to this, so this is not me blaming them, but I think there was a slight sort of feeling of, oh, you need to have a couple of semi-serious subjects there, Christian. They can't be drama, music, tech, and PE. Do you know what I mean? Which, you know, actually, I don't know. Yeah, I won't go into too much detail on that, but I think the whole music thing, I think I'm sort of a performer, and a sort of like, I like playing guitar and I enjoyed acting, but it was never sort of on the table that I was going to go to like a drama school. I don't think that was just never on the table. And it wasn't even, I think I was so like reliant on my parents to make decisions for me, and so fearful of making the wrong ones that I would just do what they told me to do. And they were like, right, well, what makes sense is for you to do something vocational, because you're not academic, or at least you're not like passionately academic about any particular subject. So why don't you do marketing and public relations? Oh yeah, and also, you know, you're sporty. So why don't you do sports marketing and public relations? And that's what I did for 3 years at Leeds Beckett.
Were we there at the same time? When did you go to Leeds?
Yeah, we were. I think we've talked about that. I was there 2008 to 2011.
Yeah. We were there at the same time. I had a friend who did PR and marketing. Anyway, we'll talk about this later.
Yeah. And I didn't enjoy it, really. And I spent a lot of my free time. It was just almost like this bleedingly obvious, like, I did play rugby at uni, but like I was also spending a lot of my time playing music, you know, and playing in bands. Like, my degree was so secondary, if that, you know, like I just didn't care for it. And then on top of that, there was like a scene associated with that. So, you know, drinking and drugging and house parties, and I bloody loved a house party.
I bet we were at some of the same ones.
Probably.
Bet we were.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure we were. Yeah, house parties are the best because you can just kind of get away with anything, really. Yeah. It was just like, I think, yeah, so I guess to answer your question, like I was, I think first year, it's like all about just passing, and I did. But the thing is, in my second year, when, you know, really you're meant to be knuckling down, was when my partying was ramping up.
Yeah.
So like, cool, well, now I know I don't have to like hang out with people I don't particularly like. I have a better idea of who I like and, you know, where I like to go out. Yeah, it was just different. First year felt a bit like forced fun, and I didn't really enjoy my first year, to be honest with you. Second year, I was starting to find my feet, but it was also when I found other substances. Third year was like, oh, you need to slow down a little bit on the substances there, mate, because you're getting a little bit carried away. But it was still, you know, a thread. You know, I wasn't going out like every night, but when I went out hard. Like,
yeah.
So, you know, I look back at that experience. I look back at my 3 years at university, and, you know, there's definitely addiction problems there, and, you know, I just wasn't able to really spot it at the time. But just kind of, because there was always somebody else I could always somehow like justify it. There was enough people around that would also be up for doing it, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, I hid the really, really bad bits. Like, I was incredibly depressed by my last year at uni. My anxiety was absolutely through the roof, but I didn't know that that's what it was. I, you know, hadn't really had much experience of like diagnosed mental health issues. Like, I knew my mum was a bit nuts, but I didn't know that she had like anything real, which I now know that she does, and it runs in the family. But I spent so much time in my room just on my own, just crying and just feeling awful. And again, I now know that my drinking had so much to do with that, because, you know, they talk about the four horsemen, talking about sayings where like you wake up and it just feels like the weight of the world is on you, and like everything feels big, everything feels scary, everything, it feels like the world is ending. um
Mm.
and I think at uni that was really the first time I kind of experienced that. Did you have that, Ollie?
Yeah, yeah. I think especially kind of, yeah, getting that extra bit of freedom, you know.
Mm.
And with freedom kind of came that, oh my god, I've got to take care of myself, and just the anxiety of that, you know, of just kind of like, no one's going to nurse me back to health here. I'm not saying like up until the moment I left home, my parents were doting on me 24/7, but you know, like not having that backdrop, especially, yeah, it was really scary too. I think, like you said, like not really knowing much about mental health. I think
Mm.
it's just kind of getting that sense that like not only did I have that sort of stuff, but like I also had that idea that I was fundamentally wrong because of it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there was something very, very wrong going on inside of me. And it's just like you say, just like not the case.
Mm. Yeah, I also remember my self-care was horrendous. Like year, my second year, I lived with three girls, and I was disgusting. Like my room would just be covered in stuff. And it would get to a point like every couple of months where they would all, it was like an intervention. They would come in and be like, Alex, you have got to sort your life out. Like, we're going to help you. Like, you need to throw away all of this stuff. There's like moldy like plates and cups in your room. There's like ashtrays full of shit. Like, it just, and I just didn't care. Like, I just lived in filth and just somehow like just pushed it down and pushed it down and pushed it down. And it was awful. And then in my last year, I was just like, I'm just going to live with boys because they're not going to care. And they 100%. I lived with five guys, and they 100% just like let me get away with it. Like they just didn't pull me up on it at all, which I loved. And they also drank so much harder and like were out so much later. And we would like, yeah, it was chaos. It was absolute chaos.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Thinking
yeah.
about that, Christian.
I am. Yeah. No. I remember girls at uni were sometimes worse than the guys. I do remember that. Guys get a bad rep with uni houses. I mean, I did live with 6 guys for 2 years, and our house was. It just you just gave up after a while. You're just like, there are so many plates, and you know, there'd be talk about like rotas and like, oh yeah, we'll do a rota. And then it works for like a day, and then I was like, well, I'm not doing it anymore. If you're not going to do your thing, I'm not going to do it either. I remember one thing. So what you reminded me of was about like unmanageability around money at uni as well. Like I spent my student loan and overdraft, so four grand in my first term. Yeah.
Mental.
No care for just like it's the cause and effect thing. I remember my dad used to quite often say cause and effect, Christian. Like, if you've got this amount of money, this is what you've got to last you this amount of time. You've got to like space it out, you know, to last you for this long. Okay. And I just could not. And I think there was a part of me which was like, well, if I run out, mum will always give me some money, you know,
Yeah.
mum will always give me 100 quid,
Yeah.
you know, to last me a couple of weeks or.
It's that we've talked about this before. It's kind of that entitlement, but also completely ignoring consequences, and just like pretending they don't exist. And then when they happen, expecting someone else to bail you out.
Oh, yeah, yeah, exactly. It's just not taking responsibility, and that's something that I think recovery, certainly in AA, it's like kind of encouraged that you know you do take responsibility for your recovery, and that requires you to take action, and that can be applied to you know, all areas of your life. You know, it's not just, I mean, 12-step recovery, AA, is quite often described as like the locker room. You know, it's like the locker room for life. It's like you start to learn, like, okay, one of the big reasons that you are the way that you are is because you don't actually take responsibility or take the action required in order to avoid these things from happening. So do something, you know, do something about it, you know, from a loving place, from a place of love. Yeah, slowly but surely, I think it filters into our lives a bit more, and we become a little bit more, and things don't, it's not like all of a sudden overnight, you know, I'm this sober, you know, genius, rich, you know, all these amazing things. You know, it's still, we're all babies really in the grand scheme of things. I mean, you're both 4 years, I'm 3 and a bit. But yeah, you know, those promises that they talk about, I think I do trust that they sort of come true slowly but surely, you know.
Yeah. So Ollie, when you went back, how early into your sobriety was that, and how was it? What happened?
I think I was 7 months sober at the time, and I mean, initially it was scary, like especially since I mean, I live in London now, but I got sober in Gloucestershire, and they're very hard on the don't go anywhere near a pub, don't even look at a pub, in that kind of, like, I think maybe that's the more rural you go. And so yeah, going to uni, I was really scared, and I think, you know, it was, I definitely withdrew a bit, I think, in my first semester, which I really regret. I remember, so I went to a university called Queen Mary, and it's like, I think maybe a third of the university is like practicing Muslim. So actually not, there's a substantial number of people who don't drink. And I remember just going out for karaoke with a few people. And like some people were drinking, some people weren't. Like everyone except me telling myself that I was in danger was like going hard and like absolutely loving it. And I was just kind of that night, I was just like, oh my God, have I just been lying to myself? Like obviously, there's a huge amount of like pragmatism that has to go into like early sobriety and, avoiding triggers and stuff like that. But in the, medium long term, especially the kind of, when people talk about the uni experience, they're not always talking about sitting in a lecture theatre, are they? But yeah, the uni experience was still available to me. And it was yeah, it was really cool to discover that.
That's amazing, actually. I never thought about that. I mean, I can't imagine going somewhere like Leeds and trying to be sober, but that sounds like it might have actually been quite a relief. And did you find that you gravitated more towards people that didn't drink, or did it not really make a difference?
Honestly, no. I think when I mean, you get the occasional person who was like hard life is about drinking, which is kind of how I was. And I think maybe I struggled to resonate with people like that, which is ironic given that that was me. But I mean, it's still got a lot of love for those people. But other than that, it didn't really make a difference. And, there's various things that you can do to like not draw attention to the fact. Like if I was close friends with people, then yeah, they wouldn't like know I was in recovery. That was my personal policy about it. But with like acquaintances, I mean, if you go to a house party, you just drink out of a mug instead of a glass, and then no one's got a clue that you're just drinking a Pepsi Max or whatever. It doesn't become like a big thing. And I guess the thing with being like sober in the long term is like learning to artificially lower one's inhibitions, and kind of like getting a little bit more comfortable with myself. And at that point, actually, there's so many things that I thought that I could only do while drinking, where it just doesn't matter to me anymore, and it doesn't matter to the people that I'm doing it with, either because they don't know or because they just don't care. So
I
yeah.
definitely found that like my kind of best group of friends are still house party people,
Yeah.
I definitely found that like I would still get to the place of being like the loud, fun Alex that was like chatting to everyone, but it just took me a little bit longer. And it just reminded me that like the drinking for me, especially at the beginning, was really, really about like social anxiety, not feeling like I was enough, and realizing that actually I could get to that place without alcohol, and that it was natural for me to like feel a bit nervous at the beginning, and that was okay, and that I could actually, you know, maybe talk to the people that I knew first, and then gradually as my confidence built, I would like branch out and talk to some new people. And yeah, just realizing that I didn't need the alcohol to do that, you know. Did you find that as well?
Yeah, honestly, like, especially at the minute, I like, there's all my housemates like drink somewhat frequently, and there's occasional times people come over. I'm now wary about saying this, given that we are in the middle of a pandemic. This is entirely on my flatmates, not me. I'm gonna put all the blame on them. But yeah, just being kind of like gregarious and like all of that without actually having to kind of enable it with alcohol, Like it's just kind of like people will come over and I'll already be able to. It's not like I think back in the day, you know, which person I came across to someone who I kind of like was acquainted with or like friends with or whatever, was at what point in the night they arrived or I arrived. Do you know what I mean? Is like what personality I had. Whereas now I'm able to be like that kind of like fun person, but I can do it as soon as they step in the door. And I have to be like, wait, give me an hour and then we can have some real chats. We can go dance then. But right now I'm just gonna sit here with my back slightly tense, kind of hope that you don't think that I'm weird or anything like that. And yeah, it's I almost prefer it that way, yeah.
Yeah, it's the freedom that you're basically describing the freedom that you now have as a result of, doing the 12 steps, right, in AA, and having that compulsion to drink removed. That thing that you used to think was like the holy elixir to like having confidence and being able to be sociable, and it nonsense. Like it's so, like I used to think like before I played a gig, I had to have 3 pints in order to be able to like, because I was so self-conscious. I used to care so much about other people's opinions. And I put so much pressure on myself as well to be like amazing. And I had to have this thing to kind of calm me down. And I sometimes, it's amazing now, like how today, like I can just sort of quite confidently go over to somebody that I've never met before and introduce myself, or like pick up a guitar in front of, I still get nervous, like definitely. I had to do a best man speech after like a year in. Oh, that was, I could actually feel my hand just going like that. It started off strong, and then like halfway through, I was like, oh my God, I'm physically shaking. Like, it's not cool. But yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty common, isn't it? Like public speaking in general is not exactly in everybody's comfort zone. It's quite a difficult thing. But now, yeah, certainly when I play like guitar, where I do feel kind of very comfortable, and I don't. It seems mad that I used to need to think that I needed like 3 pints to do that.
It's also kind of, as you do work the steps and kind of hone in more on who you are, the fear of judgment gets less. And I think that was so much again about why I drank, was because I felt like I needed to be the person that I thought other people wanted me to be. And I don't necessarily feel that now. I mean, I do sometimes, but for the most part, I'm so much more comfortable just being who I am. Like I remember when I went back to do my teaching degree, like I was like the nerd who like sat in the front and was like, oh, pick me, and like got all my work in early, and like did everything extra, like did all the extra reading, like did all the extra work, and just like didn't care what other people thought about it. Like I absolutely loved it, and I just lent into that so much. um and everyone used to joke that I was like the main tutor's favorite, and they'd call me the teacher's pet and stuff, and like I just laughed, like I just thought that was quite funny. um but yeah, when you went back to study, did you find that you had like a kind of newfound interest, like a newfound motivation, and how was it different from the first time round?
Yeah, definitely. Honestly, I think it would be really I mean, it was always really difficult for me to enjoy anything that I was like studying because I couldn't keep up with it, right? It's like it's always a chore when I'm like trying to catch up with something. But um yeah, when I was at Queen Mary, it was like, oh my god, I'm actually on top of this, and it is all really cool stuff. You know, like going to a lecture and kind of having a clue what was going on, and like actually being able to learn stuff instead of just going there to like catch up with people or whatever. Was just kind of, yeah, it was like I'd unlocked something that I didn't really know was there. It's like, oh my god, I can actually enjoy this, you know, because I've never really been like that at school. I was kind of, always waiting for the bell to ring, and I've never really been like. It's bizarre to say this now, but I was never really an academic person, given that's kind of like what I'm trying to get into at the minute. It's just like, oh my god, I actually love this. This is great, and I don't have to like compromise my life in order to get it. There's no, I did fairly well like in uni and sobriety, but it wasn't. It didn't feel like I was making huge sacrifices. It was just kind of like showing up and enjoying it.
Yeah.
It's just something that I actually had as part of my choices. So.
Yeah, it's
Mm.
kind of like finding your purpose. I mean, we've talked about work
Mm.
before, and how kind of both Christian and I feel like we've really tapped into where our heart is and what our purpose is, the skills that we offer, something that we can make money out of, and something that's needed. Christian introduced me to the word ikigai, which is like the combination of all of those things. And yeah, I think going back to uni was that for me, was just realizing like I'm actually really good at this, I love it, and I can do it as a job. And I kind of never really associated enjoying something with being able to do it as a job. I kind of thought that they had to be two separate things.
Yeah.
And obviously, like I don't enjoy my work all the time, but for the most part I feel like I'm doing what I'm meant to do. Christian,
Mm.
you went back and did your personal training qualification, didn't you?
I did, yeah. I mean, the personal training qualification for me was like, in order. Okay, I do. I have a couple of friends who are probably more into health and fitness than I am. I'm not like obsessed with health and fitness. I exercise most days because it's good for my well-being, and I enjoy it. But I studied it more to allow me to have the agency to be able to do other things around it. So I'm actually going like back in a gym, and going into the gym for the first time when they open on the 12th of April, and probably will treat that kind of as a full-time thing initially, just to pick up clients. But I mean, ultimately I want to get to a point where I do that. I'm also, as I say, play music, so I want to maintain that, continue doing that. And I've actually, funnily enough, considered like, well, two things. I'm like, do I want to go to music school or do I want to go to acting school? For some reason, I had like this like proper out of the blue, probably a higher power moment of like acting school. And I was like, really? But it kind of makes sense in a way because, as I said, like, drama at school and at college and stuff, it was like something that I just kind of was naturally good at. But it was just never like something that I'd considered pursuing. And I quite enjoy, not that I still don't necessarily right now have an ambition to be an actor, but I'd actually feel like I'd enjoy the what you get from doing the learning, like a lot of kind of self-development, I think, and stepping outside your comfort zone and all that great stuff. So yeah, it's definitely been playing on my mind recently. Maybe not this year though. Not this year. This year. The focus is just like the business side, get some money coming in. Maybe next year I'll look at
Yeah. I mean, we're coming up to the end, Ollie. But do you just kind of want to sum up for us what your sober studying experience kind of taught you? I know that's quite a broad question, but
I think it's interesting. I think when I first went to uni, what I kind of wanted out of it was like a roaring social life and also like roaring success. You know, like I wanted to be both a genius and I wanted to be like the center of attention in every single party. And if anything, it taught me that, you know, like I can have all of that. It kind of taught me that my past experience was very, you know, like my drinking experience was misleading in terms of what my capabilities were, you know. And it also just taught me that like I could build real connections with people without first getting drunk with them, you know. I think, you know, that's something I really focus on in life in general, just like having connections with people. And that was something I could only do when I was getting hammered with someone. I didn't really feel a bond between me and someone unless we got really drunk together. And it's like, oh my God, like I can feel that same thing. I can build those same connections. Without that, it's just kind of crazy. And I think at the end of the day, that's so much what uni's about for people, right? It's just the relationships. Yeah, I got that. And that was crazy.
Yeah, I love that. I love that idea that we limit ourselves in our drinking and we don't realize, we think we're expanding ourselves and making ourselves better. And actually, when we get sober, we realize that we're so much more capable than we ever thought we were. Like, I think for me, one of the biggest things was like, I did not think I was capable of dealing with big emotions without having a meltdown. And what going back to uni actually taught me, because my PGCE was one of the most stressful years of my life, but doing it sober, I was like, oh my God, I can actually do this. Like I can deal with this stress and working at the same time and maintaining my sobriety. And, you know, I couldn't believe it. I was like, wow, like I'm actually capable of this. Whereas the first time round, I was like, I felt like I was constantly scrabbling and feeling like I was kind of trying to catch up with myself. So lastly, we're just going to wrap up with a little bit of gratitude. What is something that you're grateful for today, Ollie?
I'm really grateful to have been on here. Also, I had like an absolutely banging bacon bagel for breakfast. So that definitely goes on the gratitude list.
Nice. Christian?
Today, I'm grateful that I was able to, yesterday I called my sister and my mum and genuinely, you know, asking how they were, you know, and you know, when I was at university, I barely called my mum, you know, and now today I can sort of think of her and maybe put in a call once a week and just sort of see how it's going, you know, and yeah, I'm grateful for that, definitely.
Love that. I am grateful for two things. I've got a puppy-free weekend. My brother took the dog for the weekend, so I can like actually focus on trying to get rid of this cold. And Star Wars, because I just love it and it's making me so happy. I watched it the other night with my friends and I'm watching it again today and it just gives me life. It just gives me life. I'm such a nerd and I'm owning it.
Star Wars episode next week.
Yeah, why not? Let's do it. All right. Thank you so much, Ollie, for joining us and all of our
Thanks
listeners.
so much for having me.
We will be back next week. Please do like and subscribe. If you have any questions or feedback about what you've heard today, we'd love to hear from you. Send us a message on Instagram at Young and Sober Podcast or email us at youngandsober@outlook.com. That is it for episode 8. We are young and sober.
Sober.
Bye.
Bye.